Today, we're going to unpack a huge strategy that could really define India's environmental future. We're diving into a national roadmap for a technology called CCUS and asking the big question, is this the game changer India needs to hit its pretty ambitious climate goals? Let's get into it. So, if you had to name the single biggest challenge facing a country with over 1.4 billion people, what would you say? Is it economic growth, energy security, or is it the, ever-growing threat of climate change? Well, the truth is, for India, it's all of them, and they're all tangled up in this really difficult dance. And this lays out the core problem perfectly. On one hand, you've got the monumental task of powering a developing nation, right? Lifting millions of people out of poverty, which, let's be honest, has always meant burning a lot of fossil fuels. But on the other hand, there's this urgent global demand for climate action, a responsibility to protect our shared future. How on earth do you do both of those things at the same time? This really brings us to what you could call India's climate crossroads. The numbers here tell a pretty dramatic story, and the stakes for the country, and for the rest of the world, could not be higher. Let's just start with this one number, 3. India is currently the third largest emitter of carbon dioxide on the entire planet. We're talking about 2.6 gigatons every single year, and that's a direct result of its rapid industrial growth and its heavy reliance on coal, oil, and natural gas. But, of course, that's only half the story. India has also made this massive promise, one of the world's most ambitious climate targets actually, to get to net zero emissions by the year 2070. Now, what that means is that any greenhouse gases they put out have to be balanced by what they take out of the atmosphere. So you see this huge gap between where India is right now and where it needs to go. The big question is, how do you possibly bridge that? And that's where the technology at the heart of our explainer today comes in. The proposed solution is a group of technologies called CCUS. So, what exactly is it? Okay, so CCUS stands for Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage, and the idea is actually pretty straightforward. You essentially grab the carbon dioxide right at the source, like a power plant's smokestack or a steel factory, before it even has a chance to get into the atmosphere. Then, once you've got it, you have to do something with it. So let's follow the journey. It all starts with capturing CO2 from a big industrial source. From there, it gets compressed and then moved, usually through pipelines. And finally, it gets to its final destination, where it's either turned into a new product or it's basically buried for good, deep underground. So let's just boil that down into 3 simple steps. It's easy to remember. First, you capture the carbon. Second, you transport it. And third, you have to make a really big decision. Are you going to utilize it or are you going to store it? And this choice, this use versus store question, is absolutely critical to the entire strategy. I mean, these are 2 totally different philosophies, and each one comes with its own very unique set of pros and cons. All right, let's break this down. So on the utilization side, that's CCU, the whole point is to recycle that captured CO2 into something valuable, like synthetic fuels or maybe even building materials. This is really appealing because, well, it can make money, right? It creates a business model. But the downside? It often only offsets some of the emissions, and the markets for these products, they're still kind of small. Now, on the storage side, CCS, the goal is just permanent removal. You take the CO2 and inject it deep into the earth. This offers a real long-term solution, but it's incredibly expensive to get started, and it comes with long-term risks, like the possibility of it leaking out. So, knowing all that, how is India actually planning to pull this off? Let's get into the official roadmap and see how they're trying to build this into a real national strategy. The main objective, right from the Department of Science and Technology, is crystal clear. This isn't just some fuzzy idea. The goal is to create a really focused national push to make CCUS a real, workable technology for India. And they've laid out a plan that spans decades. Phase 1, which is basically from now until 2030, is all about the research and small-scale test projects. Then Phase 2, up to 2035, is about plugging these technologies into actual industries and getting the rules and regulations in place. And finally, Phase 3, that's the big one. That's about rolling this out on a full commercial scale across major industries. It is definitely a long-term vision. The roadmap zeroes in on 3 main ways to develop this. The first is called end of pipe, which is really just a fancy way of saying we'll bolt on this capture technology to factories that are already running. The second is CCUS-compliant design, which just means making sure any new plants are built ready for this tech from the get-go. And then there's the most ambitious one-pot conversion. This is about inventing new chemical processes to turn captured CO2 directly into things like fuels or plastics, all in a single efficient step. Now, having a detailed roadmap is fantastic, but we have to be realistic here. This path is not going to be easy. In fact, the plan itself points out some pretty major challenges waiting on the horizon. And yeah, it is an uphill battle, no doubt about it. You've got these huge hurdles to get over. First, the cost. The upfront investment is just immense, which is a really tough pill to swallow for a developing nation. Then, with storage, you have that long-term risk of leaks, which would need to be monitored for centuries. For utilization, the process of converting the CO2 uses a lot of energy itself, and the markets for the final products are still pretty small. And on top of all that, you have to convince the public that it's okay to have new CO2 pipelines and storage sites in their area. And so that leaves us right back here with the final question. India has a clear, it has an ambitious, and it has a very detailed plan to solve one of its biggest problems. But the challenges, the technological, the economic, the social ones, they're just as real. So will this technology actually be the critical key that lets India grow its economy while hitting its climate targets? Well, that's the billion-person question that we're going to see answered over the next few decades.